While the source material was released during the Obama administration, Station 11 gives you a different kind of pandemic, which hopefully doesn't eventually mirror reality. When it comes to covering the show, we're going to do it based off of how it's released, so each topic is going to cover an entire episode. So, when it comes to episode 1, that'll be topic 1, and that deals with us meeting Javon and also Kirsten. Now, when it comes to Javon, what we're told is he has 2 siblings. One is Saya, who is a medical professional, either an RN or perhaps a doctor, and she is kind of in the heart of day 0 of the flu epidemic, and warns Javon to get to their younger brother's Frank's home. And in terms of who Frank is, he is someone who's portrayed as a recluse, but he's also a Pulitzer winner. Now, what exactly did he win for? What was the project's name? What was it about? That's not gone into. All we know that is Javon originally was just watching a man named Arthur play King Lear and die on stage. Next thing you know, he's up on the stage, even though he has no real medical knowledge to really do anything, and that's when he spots Kirsten. Kirsten, who's nicknamed Kiki by Arthur, she's an 8-year-old girl who really loves acting, and that's what she wants to do with her life. But one of the issues that she has is that between her handler Tanya and her parents, nobody on this day is keeping up with her, and they're worried about other things. Tanya goes off with Arthur, who dies in a hospital. And then when it comes to Kirsten's parents, Javon, being who he is, he decides to never mind his girlfriend and just have her go home alone. And he tries to take this kid home. Problem is, his sister calls, telling him about getting to Frank's house. And then when it comes to Kirsten, she doesn't have keys to her home. Her parents aren't home. She can't get in contact with them because her phone dies. And she, of course, doesn't remember their number. So he kind of is forced to... I don't want to say he takes temporary custody of her, but he does take responsibility for her. And granted, he does give her the option to possibly go into a cab and go off on her own, but then he lies and says that her parents contacted him and said it was okay. So, needless to say, Javon is overall a good guy, but he's put in this very awkward situation that, for whatever reason, when it comes to episode 2, they kind of dropped the ball on. Now, speaking of episode 2, for whatever reason, we learn that something happened to Javon and also happened to Frank. It isn't clear what exactly, but it is part of what trauma Kirsten has gone through. And we go from around day 0 when Frank and Javon are kind of like this new family, and she's learning that her parents died and everything, to us jumping to 2 years ahead where she looks very feral, hair undone, and she's basically fending for herself. During this time, she meets the person who's known as the conductor and also joins what's called the Traveling Symphony. The Traveling Symphony is basically a Shakespearean troupe, and across what is called the Wheel, of which we're not really told what locations they go to, they perform Shakespeare. Now, jumping to 20 years after day 0, Kirsten is one of their most renowned players, and also she's somebody who increasingly you can see has abandonment issues. This is mainly shown through the person who used to be her girlfriend, named Charlie, going off of the Wheel and leaving the troupe for about a year so that they can raise their kid. To make a long story short, we're told that Charlie and Kirsten have been together for at least 17 years. So that means maybe the year after Kirsten joined the troupe, that's when, for whatever it means, Charlie joined in. And because of that, they're best friends. They used to date for a while. And on that note, it's not clear whether or not Kirsten may be gay, bi, or just was lonely. Towards the end of this episode, we see her in the arms of what I assume could be a man. But in the 20 years past day 0, Kirsten is with the Traveling Symphony, and a few odd things happen as they go into St. Josephine? I'll put the correction off to the side. And while they're at this location, they get a new member, a man named Dan, And Dan is somebody who has been rejected by Dita at least 4 times to audition for the troupe. Now, why would he audition this many times? Well, let's look at it this way. We're still, when it comes to the state of the world, and it's a bit of a dystopia vibe. So when it comes to the Traveling Symphony, not only do you get a community, but you also get some type of purpose. For with them traveling around doing Shakespeare, they're pretty much welcome wherever they go and have an audience wherever they go. And granted, not everybody likes Shakespeare, and in fact, when it comes to performing Hamlet, some members of the Traveling Symphony, because they don't like that play specifically, don't take part, which does give Dan an opportunity to play somebody, but at the same time, he also is not somebody fond of this play, but he auditioned, he finally got in, so when it comes to Dita, who handles the casting, he's like, get your ass up on stage. But when it comes to what happens in episode 2, probably the main thing you want to focus on is this gentleman named David. Now, the end of the world came, so of course, you know, a bunch of different groups and sects are going to come up. And of course, religious fanatics or people like that are also going to come into play. Now, when it comes to David, one of the things that throws Kirsten off a little bit is because on top of saying that he's part of the traveling Hamilton troupe, because, you know, Hamilton has to be his thing. Hamilton still has to be a thing, I should say. He also says a lot of things that Kirsten knows not to be true, and because David has an interest in Alex, who is 8 years younger than Kirsten, and she kind of sees as a little sister in a way, it sets up a lot of red flags. And with David kind of threatening Kirsten and the troupe a little bit, she decides to, since Kirsten loves a good weapon, especially a knife, she stabs him in the middle of the night after the performance of Hamlet and everybody's celebrating. Now, unfortunately for her, he lives despite being stabbed, and he travels back to wherever he came from, which for Kirsten may mean, assuming that the wheel that the conductor has everybody go on never changes, their next stop could be the last. In episode 3, we switch over to Miranda and almost completely abandon Kirsten and anything that's going on with her story. For while, yes, Arthur is part of Miranda's story, since those two ended up into a relationship and even married, it's mostly about Miranda, who is this woman from St. Croix, who moved up to Illinois when she was young, and since about 2005 in the show, she has worked at a logistics company. That job pretty much took over her life, and when it comes to her meeting Arthur, it's not like she was looking for a relationship, never mind marriage. She was minding her own business, working on her graphic novel, Station 11, and you know, Arthur was perhaps feeling a little bit lonely because his friend Clark's birthday was coming up. He didn't have a gift. And I think what we learned most about Arthur is he's one of those people who, when it comes to love languages, quality time and attention is a big thing for him. So with Miranda, even during her interview with Leon, her boss, being a bit distant and kind of introverted, you can see for Arthur it brings a bit of intrigue, but also it makes it feel like he's often being pushed to a distance. But when it comes to Miranda, we're never really shown that she was fully like enamored by Arthur. She really didn't care about his career because she had a full-on career of her own. And even when it is said that it is rumored rather that he's having an affair with this woman named Elizabeth, Miranda doesn't really care. In fact, you're kind of left to wonder, as much as you can see she might have dated him because he took an interest and maybe not a lot of people approach her, why did she marry him is a whole different story. And when it came to that affair, she pretty much didn't care until Elizabeth revealed that Arthur took Elizabeth into Miranda's little shop where she would storyboard and everything, Station 11, and had her see it. That violation is what ended their marriage and led her to setting the whole thing on fire and just destroying all of her work that she's been doing for who knows how many years. Now, jumping to 2020 when Day Zero is, Miranda's still with this company and she visits Arthur to show the finished product and notes that she has multiple copies. And the reason why is good to note that she has multiple copies because one of the things that in episode 2 David says is a line from the book. And it seems Miranda's book has evolved into something which has a bit of a cult following, but not cult following of, like how Harry Potter has fans or the Hunger Games has fans, but people who have used this book possibly in order to create a type of, not civilization, but definitely some type of community which possibly could be threatening. Now, we don't really get to learn what Station 11, the graphic novel, really has in it. All we know is that there's an astronaut who feels lonely, and it's a lot of Miranda's feelings poured into it. But, excuse the tangent. What matters when it comes to 2020 is that's when Day Zero hits, and when it comes to Miranda, similar to Sia, Frank to a certain degree, even Javon, we're not told what happened to them after Day Zero. All we know when it comes to Miranda is she was supposed to be in Malaysia to handle a merger between Leon's company and another one. And because of Day Zero, all that happened is she was given an opportunity to escape onto some type of ship, didn't make it because she learned Arthur died. And because of that, Miranda ended up just going back to her hotel room and sealing all the vents and all the means that air can get in, leaving us unsure of what may have happened to her. So when it comes to the highlights on defense, low points, actually there's no low points for this. It's not gonna be like the topics where it's based off of each episode, but just all 3 episodes as a whole. So to begin, we have Javon and Kirsten's dynamic. And the main reason why we like the dynamic, because it kind of reminded us from, if you ever played Telltale Games as The Walking Dead, there was a gentleman named Lee and Clementine, and their dynamic kind of reminds me of their relationship. And also, there was another one that I can't think of offhand, but that was in a written review that also reminded me of. And while, yes, when it comes to episode 2, we kind of lose Javon due to the way the show makes it seem. Javon and possibly Frank as well probably died a violent death. And while Kirsten was able to either hide away or get away, those two were probably massacred. Be it by people like David, because one thing we see in episode 2 is that on Kirsten's hand she has little marks, and what she says to David is that's for killing certain kind of people, and it could very well be that David's people 20 years ago are who killed Javon and also Frank, but again, it's hard to say. All that matters, especially when it comes to this topic, is that bond we see is definitely a strong highlight. It's unfortunate, though, that with this being a limited series and Javon seemingly dying at this point, it feels almost like wasted potential. But again, there's still multiple episodes left, so they may tap back into that, but right now we're unsure. The second highlight for us when it comes to the first 3 episodes is Miranda. The main reason we love Miranda is because she feels very different from what we're used to. When it comes to shows like Run the World, Insecure, even Harlem, you see pretty much the archetypes of what we usually get for black women. The only difference is now there's a little bit more diversity in terms of skin tone, but otherwise it's pretty much people who have strong personalities, or at least notable personalities, where Miranda, it's different. She, to me, the closest thing I can kind of picture her toward is like Annalise Keating on How to Get Away with Murder, but without the whole drama in her life. Because the way Miranda seems, she's not seeking drama, she's not seeking really any strong human interactions. She's an introvert, and she's not like an awkward introvert or something like that. She's a person who knows herself, she's somebody who enjoys her own company, and as she said, I think either Arthur, Elizabeth, or somebody at the dinner party that Arthur had, she is perfectly fine spending hours of her day, maybe the whole day, just drawing and just doing mindless tasks. And I feel that in books we find characters like that, but we don't really in TV shows and even movies. And even in terms of the movies I've seen, especially like at film festivals, I can't say that we've seen somebody like Miranda. And it makes me hope that even though there's no sign that she might have survived past episode 3, that she hopefully did and can contribute more to the show. So when it comes to on defense topics, I think the first one is the world building. Episode one didn't really do much of world building. We know they're in Chicago, and that's pretty much it. Episode three also didn't do much world building. We just focused on Miranda, maybe learn a little bit about Arthur and Arthur's affair, and that's it. Episode 2 presented us some kind of world building by us seeing the traveling symphony move about, learn that there are different groups that are still surviving, including one that was, I might not mention in a written review, about the Museum of Civilization, which is a group headed by I don't know his name, but he played the father in Veronica Mars. And outside of that, we also have what may or may not be a religious sect headed by David's group that a part of me just feels a little bit tired of fanatical religious groups during apocalypse settings doing bad things, but excuse me, that's kind of this two-sided edge when it comes to religion. As much of it as it can bring salvation and faith and some type of purpose to people, it could easily be manipulated for those who are weak-minded, and it can easily be manipulated against those who are weak-minded and make them into lambs instead of possible shepherds toward light, goodness, what have you. But with us seeing through the traveling symphony the world, there is hope that while whatever group David's a part of is probably going to be looking in the background, maybe we could actually see more of how the world looks afterwards. And also, considering year 2 when Kirsten was looking feral, we can kind of get an understanding of how would a child survive in that time, especially on their own, and whether or not when it comes to her use of a blade, how often did she really have to use it, and when it comes to the traveling symphony, how did that even form? Because we know it's because they were former actors, crew members, and stuff like that, but how the world went from closing itself off, sealing all entrances, exits, air ducts, and all that, to having it where a group of Shakespearean performers are not just allowed into your area but welcome, is something that I hope they go into as they build up the world and also the history. So the second on defense topic deals with seeing Kirsten more than expected, and that's just because, as noted in the highlight, meeting Javon and him pairing with Kirsten gave familiar feelings of, that's it. The second one was The Last of Us when it came to Joel and Ellie. So what is kind of a Joel and Ellie kind of vibe, or a Lee and Clementine? There was something that was a hook, at least for me, which in episode 2, with us losing that, and it's just Kirsten and her not being as interesting as she was before, it's not a bad thing, but it's just an adjustment. For as much as I can appreciate Kirsten now being very good with a blade, having this relationship with a girl named Charlie that she used to be dating, and her being one of the most prominent people of the Traveling Symphony, I just feel like that adjustment, while it's not something that makes the show terrible, it's sort of like with the new Kingsman. Like you were used to something originally that was a bit more in tune with what maybe your usual likes are, and then it gets switched up into something that you can appreciate but definitely isn't like the top of your list of things you want to see. But we're just 3 episodes in. 2 episodes were just released today, so hopefully the trajectory of this show gets a bit better, because right now it's a little bit rocky, and mostly when it comes to Kirsten, who, just based off of how the posters are with Mackenzie Davis's face on it, she's probably the main person we're going to follow going forward. So fingers crossed. Here's hoping that they do enough with the Traveling Symphony, the world building, and even Kirsten to a point to make it so that this show doesn't kind of start off on a high, kind of get a little rocky in episode 2, get a little bit better because of Miranda in episode 3, and then who knows, either goes straight downhill or maybe plateaus. Either way, I'm not sure where this may go, but I'm hoping for the best, but very much prepping for the worst.